Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom surrounded by tall mountains and endless forests, there stood a grand castle with towers that seemed to touch the clouds. Inside that castle lived a kind queen. Though she was surrounded by treasures and golden halls, her heart carried a deep sorrow. She longed for a child. One winter's day, the queen sat by her window, sewing while the snowflakes drifted gently from the sky. As she worked, the needle pricked her finger, and a few drops of bright red blood fell onto the white snow on the sill. She gazed at the sight and whispered, "Oh, how I wish to have a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony." Not long after, her wish came true. She gave birth to a baby girl so fair that she was named Snow White. But joy did not last. The kind queen grew ill and passed away when Snow White was still a baby. The king, filled with sorrow, tried his best to raise his daughter. Eventually, however, he remarried. His new queen was strikingly beautiful, but her heart was cold, and jealousy ran through her veins. This queen owned a magic mirror. Every day she would stand before it and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." The queen was satisfied with this answer, and her vanity grew. Years passed. Snow White blossomed into a graceful young girl. Her hair was as dark as coal, her skin as pale as ivory, and her lips as red as blooming roses. But her beauty was not her only gift. She was kind-hearted, gentle, and loved by everyone in the kingdom. One day, when the queen once again stood before her mirror and asked the familiar question, the mirror hesitated and then replied, "You are beautiful, my queen. But Snow White has grown fairer than you." The queen's face turned pale with fury. Jealousy burned like fire in her heart. "As long as she lives, my beauty means nothing. I must be rid of her." The queen summoned the royal huntsman. A strong, broad-shouldered man, he bowed before her, awaiting orders. The queen's voice was sharp, "Take Snow White into the deep forest. Kill her and bring back her heart as proof." The huntsman was horrified. Yet disobeying the queen meant his own death. Reluctantly, he agreed. The next morning, he led Snow White into the woods. She walked innocently, marveling at the birds and wildflowers. When they reached the depths of the forest, the huntsman drew his dagger, his hands trembling. Snow White turned to him with gentle eyes. "Why do you look so troubled, good sir?" Tears filled the huntsman's eyes. "Dear princess, the queen ordered me to take your life. But I cannot harm you. Run, flee into the forest, and never return to the castle." Snow White gasped and then ran as fast as her feet would carry her. The huntsman, ashamed but relieved, killed a wild boar instead and took its heart to the queen. She believed her cruel plan had succeeded. Meanwhile, Snow White wandered deeper into the dark forest. Strange noises filled the night, the hoot of owls, the howls of wolves, the rustle of unseen creatures. Exhausted and frightened, she stumbled upon a tiny cottage nestled on a hillside. Curious, she pushed the door open. Inside, she found a neat little home with 7 small plates, 7 cups, and 7 chairs. In the bedroom, 7 tiny beds stood in a row. Weary and trembling, Snow White lay down on one of the beds and soon drifted into a deep sleep. This cottage belonged to 7 dwarfs who worked as miners in the mountains. Their names were Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. Each morning, they left to dig for jewels and gold, and each evening they returned home together. That night, when they entered their cottage, they were astonished to see a beautiful maiden asleep in one of their beds. Awakened by their whispers, Snow White gasped in fear, but the dwarfs quickly assured her they meant no harm. She told them her tragic story. The dwarfs listened with sympathy. "Stay with us," they said. "If you keep our house tidy and cook for us, we shall protect you." Snow White gladly agreed. From then on, she kept the little home warm and cheerful, while the dwarfs became her devoted friends. Weeks later, the queen once again asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair. But Snow White, who lives in the forest with 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times fairer." The queen shrieked in fury. "The huntsman deceived me. I must end this myself." Disguising herself as a peddler woman, the queen carried a basket of combs. She knocked at the dwarf's cottage when Snow White was alone. "Lovely girl, see my fine wares. Try this comb, it will make your hair shine." Snow White hesitated, remembering the dwarf's warning. Yet the old woman's gentle voice soothed her. She allowed the comb into her hair. At once, the poison hidden within it seeped into her scalp, and she collapsed unconscious. When the dwarfs returned, they found her lifeless. Searching, they discovered the comb and removed it. Snow White opened her eyes once more. "Beware, dear child," the dwarfs pleaded. "Do not trust strangers." But the queen's mirror soon betrayed the truth again. Furious, she disguised herself once more, this time carrying a bright silk lace. Pretending to be a kind merchant, she tied the lace around Snow White's waist, pulling it so tight that the girl fainted from lack of breath. Luckily, the dwarfs came home in time. They loosened the lace and revived her. Again they warned, "Do not open the door to anyone, Snow White." The final trick, the poisoned apple. Yet the queen would not give up. She prepared a magical apple, half white, half red. The red side carried deadly poison. Dressed as a poor peasant woman, she returned to the cottage. "Taste this apple, dear child. To prove it is safe, I will eat the white half, and you may eat the red." Snow White, innocent and trusting, accepted. The moment she bit the red half, her lips turned blue, and she fell lifeless to the ground. The queen cackled with triumph and vanished into the forest. The dwarfs returned and found their beloved friend motionless. This time, no comb or lace could save her. Believing her dead, they wept bitterly. They could not bear to bury her beauty beneath the earth. Instead, they built a glass coffin and laid her within, placing it in the heart of the forest. Days passed into months, months into years. Yet Snow White's beauty never faded. She looked as though she were only sleeping. One day, a young prince from a neighboring kingdom was riding through the forest. He came upon the glass coffin and gasped at the sight of the maiden inside. He asked the dwarfs who she was, and with tears they told him her story. The prince was moved. "Let me take her to my castle. I will honor her and keep her safe." Reluctantly, the dwarfs agreed. As the prince's men carried the coffin, they stumbled on a root. The jolt dislodged the piece of poisoned apple stuck in Snow White's throat. She gasped, coughed, and opened her eyes. The prince and dwarfs cried out with joy. Snow White lived again. Snow White and the prince soon grew close. He asked for her hand, and with a grateful heart, she accepted. Their wedding was celebrated with great joy. The queen, still obsessed with her mirror, asked once more, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair. But the new bride, Snow White, is 1,000 times fairer than you." Consumed by rage and envy, the queen's own bitterness destroyed her. Meanwhile, Snow White and her prince ruled their kingdom with kindness, surrounded by love and laughter. And so they lived happily ever after.